Hey there everybody, and welcome to the first episode in my new series focused on 3D printing. I'm very excited to bring you some of these amazing prints, so let's dive right in, shall we? So this video is going to be just a little longer than the ones that follow, as I'd like to go ahead and give an introduction to the printers I'm using and the software I'm going to use to make my models. After this video, I'll jump into a more regular quick paste format that just kind of covers some of the basic settings that I'm going to use for those prints, and then the time lapses and maybe a little description at the end. The printers that I'm going to be using for these videos are a couple of Creality Ender 3s. Now, before we can actually print an image, we have to generate a file based off of a 3D image to send to our printers. To prep these files for printing, I am going to be using the software called Ultimaker Cura 3.6. This is called slicing software. Slicing is the process of taking a 3D created object or a CAD object and converting it to a file that a printer can use to print from. Now, our first print is a request from my gorgeous wife, the HMS Endeavour, a British Royal Navy research vessel that was captained by James Cook. This model was designed by MakerBot. This design can be found on thingiverse.com. It's a really cool website, and I highly recommend you check it out. I am going to print this model in two colors. The first, going to be used for the bow and stern of the ship, is going to be printed in Silk Copper PLA by Strong Hero 3D. For all of the sails and upper masts, I'm going to use a white PLA by Hatchbox. Let's open up Cura and take a look at the settings that I'm going to use to get this thing printed. I'm going to go ahead and use a 0.12 millimeter layer height with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. And I'm going to do 115% on the initial layer line width to make sure it sticks to my glass bed. For the shell, I'm going to go ahead and use 3 perimeters for a 1.2 millimeter wall thickness. I'm going to go ahead and set the option for optimize wall printing order. And lastly, I'm going to go ahead and enable the setting for print thin walls. Everything else is left to default. For infill, I'm going to go ahead and use a 10% infill density with the new infill gyroid pattern. I find this pattern looks really cool, and it lets me use less plastic. Everything else is left to default. For the material, I'm going to go ahead and set this to 205 degrees Celsius, and I'm going to go ahead and set the build plate temperature to 50 degrees Celsius. Everything else is left at default. For speed, I'm going to go ahead and run at 40 millimeters per second. I find this is the perfect speed for this quality without having any problems in the print. Enable acceleration control is enabled, I believe by default, and I make sure to have enabled jerk control, and I have some modified jerk control settings. They're much lower than what Cura has for their default. Travel and cooling are just default settings, and I'm not going to use support for this model. For the build plate, I am going to change this to brim just because I am printing on a glass surface, and I want to make sure it sticks without any problem. Everything else stays default, and I go ahead and prepare the file. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick look at the layers just to make sure there are no gaps or problems with the prints, and make sure that nothing looks too fragile since this is a highly detailed model. I do have some areas here in the mast that look like they're going to be pretty thin. And though for these parts of the model I'm not too worried, when I get to the sails I may print that with 100% infill to make sure they stay as strong as possible. It is overkill, but I just want to make sure. Go ahead and save the file, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the next piece. We're going to do all of the sails in one. The only thing I'm going to change here is go into the infill. So I have it set for 10% right now. Go ahead and rip it, and I'll show you why I don't think it's going to work very well. If you look, we can see these huge gaps right in the middle of these masts, and these are not very big. We're talking maybe 5 millimeters across altogether. So I'm going to change it to 100% infill density and make sure that those are as strong as they possibly can be. I think that looks pretty good. File looks good. I'm going to go ahead and save this and go ahead and move on to printing. Wow, what an amazing print. It turned out even better than I expected it to, and my wife is absolutely in love with it. I think the white and the silk copper go really well together for this print. And of course, the instructions provided by MakerBot made assembly very easy. With that, I highly recommend exploring Thingiverse.com and myminifactory.com. They are filled with an endless supply of gadgets, gizmos, toys, and plenty for the tinkers and all of us. And this is where I go for many of the designs that I print. If you are interested in anything in this video, check out the links below. None of the links are affiliated links, and I make no money from them. They are there to help encourage more people into the world of 3D printing. Alright, we are well on our way into 3D printing. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click on the bell icon to receive notifications of new videos. Next week we are going to jump into the Star Wars EU and print out a piece of Star Wars legend. Until next time.